If you could, in 40 seconds, quite precise, can each one of you tell us why you wrote this book?
Hello, I am Mandy Smith and I'm the author of Unfettered. And I wrote this book because I really couldn't not write the book, if that makes any sense. I write usually because I'm trying to work something out for myself in journaling or writing articles, and then somehow I noticed there's a theme happening here of something that God is stirring up in me, and so a book seems to be taking shape. And so I wish I could tell you I was totally in control of the process, but I really feel like it was kind of writing me as well. So it was a part of my own listening to the Lord to try to put in words what He was doing, and then afterwards I thought, well, that's really helpful. I hope it can help someone else, and I'll put it out there in case it can. So that's how it happened.
Thank you, Mandy. I should say that Michael Colley, when he described your book, called you, I think, the new Philip Yancey for the 21st century. So if that gives you a little taster of this book, there you go. Read more. Daniel, over to you.
So my name's Daniel. I'm the author of Spacemaker. I started this book 6.5 years ago as an e-book and just kept writing, and eventually it became a book. It's about making space, so I'm really passionate about helping people rethink their relationship with digital technology and to realise just how distracted and wired and tired we are. And so I'm passionate about helping people just think about how they can live better and listen to God, make space in their lives and change some of the ways we use tech to live better.
Hi, I'm Susy Lee. I, many years ago, was teaching kids and we were talking about big issues like poverty and injustice and loneliness and friendship. And I was really amazed by how wise and engaged they were with these big topics, and they really wanted to respond. But then a little bit later when I was working with families, I realised parents and kids are not having these really big, important conversations that I think matter. I didn't grow up in a church, and I'm so grateful that my kids did, and I think churches are really great at families. So I would love churches to be the place that families come to when they want to raise kids who care. And so I kind of wrote it as a resource, a bunch of conversations that families could have together, because I believe in prevention is not cure. I think if we can raise a whole generation of kids who care, we're going to have the kingdom of heaven on earth.
Rachel and Susie, I thought you both talk about children, including children, and being part of the Christian community. How do you envisage your books being used as tools, or how do you envisage the Christian community using your books or working with them?
I have had a few churches now that have already used it. Before I wrote the book, I imagined facilitating events, putting on events in churches where we could invite families just to have conversations. And I don't know about you, but when my kids were in primary school, I met more people than any other time in my life. And so I imagined talking at, the primary school gate about, technology and, the problem that it's causing my family, and having some in the church saying, oh, yeah, I've got that problem too, but actually on Saturday afternoon we're having a family event, why don't you come along? And COVID was a great time to write a book, but it was not a good time to promote the book. But I was running these events even online and having just giving families an opportunity to talk, and I just made it really easy for them to just follow the conversations. So yeah, they're already doing it. It's great.
Fantastic. Do you want to weigh in on what being a child or having to become a child means for you as you think about your faith and walking with Jesus?
Yeah, it's amazing really, since Jesus says, unless you become like a child, you can't enter the kingdom of God, that we really don't talk very much about that as adults. I mean, if we really want to be in God's kingdom, you'd think we would take that pretty seriously. But the problem is, even if we did do that as adults, we would deal with it as adults deal with things, which is set aside our emotions, kick the kids out of the room, bring our intellect and really bring the parts of ourselves that we can just trust intellectually, which is a wonderful part of ourselves, but we don't as Westerners especially, trust our emotions, our instincts, our bodies, our senses, and those are places where the Spirit of God really works. And as children, we knew how to engage as whole beings. We weren't ashamed, but in Western culture, we have compartmentalized the human experience and kind of made a hierarchy of parts of ourselves we're ashamed of that are messy and complicated. But I think this is actually a way that exploring, because for me it didn't begin as an intellectual pursuit, it began as an invitation from God to just be more like a child when I was on a pastoral sabbatical. And when you've got time off work, you can just follow your nose and sleep if you feel like sleeping and cry if you feel like crying and wear what your favourite clothes are and eat your favourite food. And that was great for 8 weeks of sabbatical, but there was some deeper, serious stuff that was really happening in me during that time as well, which made me realise how twisted Western Christianity has become, and some really major healing happened in me as a part of that.
Yeah, fantastic. That's exciting. Yeah, it's a real antidote to think of ourselves as whole beings before God, not just the head or the heart or the hands.
Exactly.
Yeah, wonderful. That's exciting. In a similar vein, I think your book is for absolutely everybody because we all have a mobile phone, we all have a tablet. Being a Christian and writing this book, what was the connection there for you? Or what was the...
Yeah, so look, I started writing it as a business book, so it is written for an audience who are really busy, they work a lot, they're on their devices a lot, and they're trying to wrestle with how do I live well. So, but I've been a productivity consultant for at least 5 or 6 years, and also a part-time pastor for 10 years. And I wanted to bring in both aspects into a book, and to write a book which at its heart was Christian theology and talking about my faith and what I believe God is speaking into this space about technology in our world, and yet write it in a way that is deeply accessible to unchurched people and that's widely read, and where I can be explicit about my faith, but also nudge people towards asking questions about their inner life, about their spirituality, and about how technology changes our heart and our head and our habits. And so, I talk about making space, but I think in the kingdom of God, there won't be email notifications. There won't be Instagram, like instant, endless scrolling, and we won't run to stand still. And there'll be work, but it won't be hurried work where we are exhausted and there is a lack of hope and joy and peace in the way we serve. And so, if that's the kingdom that will be when heaven comes to earth, then I wanted to write a book that painted that picture for anyone who wanted to start exploring what that might look like.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I was struck as you were talking that there's something about our faith that not only is it true, but it's actually good for humanity. And so I think that is brought out a lot, I think, in your book and as in Tony's work as well. That's wonderful.
It is like having a baby because it's really, really hard to get it out. And then you see it like, oh, it's so beautiful, look. And then every day, if you don't feed it, nothing happens.
So this is part of the feeding tonight, is
Yeah,
that right?
that's right.
Yeah, okay.
So thank you so much, Sparklet, for helping me feed my baby.
It's just a serious analogy. I'm going to be thinking about my essays that I write for college in a really different way now. I'm going to feed the essay. Okay, sure.
Please. I once heard someone say that when you have a child, you become a parent, and I think it's the same in being an author. I never thought of myself as an author or even a writer. I just kept writing and kept rewriting, and eventually it wasn't until a year before it was published that we decided I think it has to actually be published as a proper book rather than a self-published, a completely independent book. And yet, it's funny, over the last year I would actually say I'm a writer and I've written another book, and it changes who you are, and it allows you to start to express yourself more broadly in the world around you, which is it's just a really nice thing.
Yeah, it's a wonderful gift that God's given us, I think, to take on that.
I think before I'd written any books, I thought that you write a book because you're an expert in something. But I think really my experience has been more that it's experimental, that I'm sensing something from God and it's happening in my life and it's really meaningful. And maybe if I put it out there, I might hear that other people are finding it resonate with them as well. And so I have to check myself sometimes because I love getting feedback, and I don't think it's mostly ego stuff, although there may be a little bit of that in there as well. But just to get a note from somebody who's read your book and say, that same spirit at work in you is also at work in me. That's like worship for me, because I know I'm not imagining this God who's working in my life. So I think that's one of the motivations for me of being willing to do the hard work and the kind of vulnerable work of putting yourself out there, to trust that maybe you're not alone and other people have a similar story.
Yeah, and it's a conversation you have. Yeah, scary but rewarding ultimately, hopefully. Yeah.